The richest countries in the world. Do you know what countries have the most wealth per capita? What do they do to get so much money? Is it worth living there? If you want to figure it out, here I go. Number 10. Denmark. In this top 10, we're going to use per capita GDP. That is, all the goods and final services that a country produces in a year. In other words, the gross domestic product divided by the number of people living in the country. Denmark's per capita GDP is $61,478. Its economic model is known as flexicurity, where employers can hire and fire employees as they please. The richest countries in the world. Do you know what countries have the most wealth per capita? What do they do to get so much money? Is it worth living there? If you want to figure it out, here I go. Number 10. Denmark. In this top 10, we're going to use per capita GDP. That is, all the goods and final services that a country produces in a year. In other words, the gross domestic product divided by the number of people living in the country. Denmark's per capita GDP is $61,478. Its economic model is known as flexicurity, where employers can hire and fire employees as they please. There's no minimum wage and you can start up a business within hours. On the other hand, the unionization rate is high, and there are a lot of collective agreements between companies and employees. They can get excellent unemployment insurance, though in 6 months the insurance is halved, and in 2 years it fully runs out. To get this insurance, you must pay a membership to the unemployment funds that are generally controlled by the unions and receive government assistance. Also, there's a social support system in charge of making sure that everyone has the minimum necessary to live. What do you think of the Danish system? Do you go for flexicurity, or job stability and minimum wage are more important for you? Number 9. San Marino. Per capita GDP of this small landlocked country surrounded by Italy is $61,508. San Marino was a tax haven, but it introduced measures such as forbidding anonymous companies in 2010 and reducing bank secrecy in 2017 to finally be removed from the blacklist. This was a hard blow to San Marino's economy. Between 2008 and 2017, the GDP decreased by 30%, but the country managed to reverse the trend by driving manufacturing and tourism, attracting foreign investment with significantly lower taxes than the rest of Europe, and succeeding in getting companies to open a branch in the country. Even though it's not a member of the European Union, San Marino helps the organization to stop money laundering, and its currency is the euro. Its own national designs are even on the back of this currency, as if it were a member of the Eurozone. Plus, it's the only country in the world where there are more cars than people. Number 8. Brunei. Brunei's per capita GDP is $64,405, but don't let it fool you. You may think the 460,000 inhabitants live like the Danes, but the truth is, they live humbly because most of the earnings go to the Sultan and his family. They manage the dividends that the main national products such as oil and natural gas bring. These are 90% of the GDP. They fund their luxury life with this. For example, the Sultan's Rolls-Royce car is covered in gold, but they provide residents with certain benefits, such as free education and healthcare, subsidized funerals, and low-interest home and car buying, which has resulted in the fact that there's a car for every 2 people just to avoid opposition to the monarchy. So the Sultan can allow himself to try imposing laws inspired by Islamic law, such as the death penalty for adulterers and homosexuals, although international pressure made him take this law back. Number 7. The United States of America. This country has a per capita GDP of $68,309 and is the largest importer and the second largest exporter of goods in the world. It's home to 30% of the millionaires in the world, 40% of multimillionaires, and 139 out of 150 of the world's biggest companies. The private sector represents 86.4% of its economy. And this largely depends on the 30 million small companies that provide jobs for 36% of the employees, whereas the big companies hire 37% of them and the state hires 14% of them. What's certain is that only slightly more than half of these small companies survive after 5 years. Its population has the higher income among developed countries, but not everything is beautiful. There are more imports than exports, the welfare state is small, and fewer goods are redistributed than other advanced economies. This is the only developed country that doesn't ensure either paid, sick, or parental leave. The richest 10% controlled 72% of the wealth between 2010 and 2011. And according to Forbes, only 3 people, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates, controlled more wealth than the lower half of the population in 2017. That year, more than 500,000 people were homeless. In 2018, 18.5 million Americans lived in extreme poverty. Middle-class income stalled between 1998 and 2016, and 15% of the population doesn't have health insurance. Number 6. Norway. Norway's per capita GDP is $69,171. The state controls strategic sectors, such as the North Sea oil that made them rich in the 70s. The government employs 30% of the economically active population, and health care is almost free because it charges the members around $225 a year. Oil assets are invested in a sovereign wealth fund, and the state can't freely draw on it, although it can use the earnings. This is the largest sovereign wealth fund of all, with $1.3 trillion invested in assets, and it controls 1% of all the shares in the world, giving great power to the company's boards of directors. The Norwegian government had influence in Facebook and Google's decision to regulate the fake news and close the gender pay gap. Despite its oil, Norway boosts the purchase of electric cars in its territory by cutting taxes. The country hopes it won't depend on fuel by 2025. It's paradoxical, isn't it? Number 5. Switzerland. Switzerland is divided into cantons that share a currency, foreign policy, and constitution. It implements a system of direct democracy through which there's a referendum every 4 months to vote on the main laws. Switzerland's per capita GDP is $75,880. The taxes are low, and business creation is encouraged. Swiss neutrality has made banking an important sector. 28% of all extraterritorial funds in the world are located there. Also, its manufacturing industry is significant, with remarkable companies such as Nestle, the pharmaceutical company Roche, and watch manufacturers Rolex, Richemont, and Swatch. Despite its high living standard, only 37% of the population has its own home, and there's no minimum wage, except in the canton of Geneva. Did you know that they encourage recycling by charging for garbage pickup? If you don't use official bags or don't put government stickers, they won't collect your garbage. Number 4. Qatar. Its per capita GDP is $97,262. There's no income tax in this country, and its unemployment rate is 0.1%. Its economic boom was during the 90s when, apart from the oil that they were already exploiting, they went for liquefying the gas. That is, converting it into a liquid for easy export. Currently, oil and gas are 85% of its exports, and even though the oil fields are expected to run out by 2023, this country has the largest gas supplies in the world. Thanks to the earnings, Qatar has a sovereign wealth fund like that of Norway that has $330 billion in assets, from which $5 billion are invested in Manhattan's building projects. Other important markets are the production of petrochemicals, fertilizers, and Islamic finance. That is, banks that don't invest in activities inconsistent with the Sharia law, such as alcoholic beverages, and that don't charge interests but a fixed overcharge for credit purchases. Its per capita GDP is $99,239. In 1987, this country was open to receive foreign investments and had a special economic zone with reduced taxes. but its unemployment rate was 17%. As a result of a reduction in the wage tax and the simplification of labor legislation, multinationals were able to expand their headquarters and hire more people. In 1999, the special economic zone spread to the rest of the country. And now multinationals employ a quarter of the Irish workforce and pay 80% of the business taxes. In total, 14 out of the 20 leading companies in the country are US multinationals. We can find Apple, Google, Facebook, Intel, Pfizer, and Microsoft. These names won't surprise you if I say that this country is one of the largest exporters of pharmaceutical products, medical equipment, and software. Number 2. Singapore. With $102,742 of per capita GDP, this city-state is a country with the highest percentage of millionaires. 1 in 6 households has $1 million available or more. Also, it's the second busiest port in the world per cargo tonnage, the largest ship repair center, and a major oil refiner. 44% of its workforce are foreigners. There's no minimum wage, the income tax is very low, and the duty is practically non-existent. The government forces its population to save a quarter of their salary. They'll use this money for medical emergencies, education, or pensions. To reduce poverty, the state gives the equivalent of about $295 or $740 to the neediest households, covering health and education. Plus, it gives a voucher worth the equivalent of $122,500 to each citizen who has children, provides poor students with low-cost laptops and refunds for public transport. However, there's no freedom of expression, and there are some strict rules such as forbidding to chew gum, and people can be punished with up to 2 years in prison. Number 1. Luxembourg. The largest per capita GDP in the world is none other than $122,740. The major economic activities are banking and industry, especially steelmaking. This country is the third most competitive financial center in Europe, after London and Zurich, and the most important banking center in the Eurozone. It benefits from its political stability, good connections with the rest of Europe, and traditional bank secrecy. In 2009, there were 152 banks with 27,000 employees. In the steel sector, the great steel iron producer Arbed stands out, where the government has a share of 31%. The minimum wage is about $2,600 a month, and since 2020, the public transport is free.